This is EnRich Your Life, a podcast about financial health, life planning, and smart decisions with Richard Leimgruber.
Hello, and welcome to EnRich Your Life podcast. I'm your host, Rich Leimgruber, and today we are talking about something that should be a serious conversation at many points in our lives. We always talk about financial strategies, and we always talk about how to protect, whether it's your assets or your dreams, right? And today we're going to be talking about basic estate planning. Estate planning comes in all different forms. There's a lot of different things that you can utilize to make sure that you're protecting your loved ones, protecting your income when it comes to estate planning. And today we're going to break it down for you and make it easy to understand. Today we'll be speaking with Samara Halpern, who is an estate planning and real estate attorney with over 20 years of diverse legal background. While working as a paralegal for the U.S. Attorney's Eastern District of New York's office, Samara attended law school at night and earned her law degree. After a career serving in the New York City Police Department as an agency attorney, following by working with the New York State Education Department in 2023, she started her own law firm, Halpern Law PC. Her goal is to leverage her experience to help clients understand how the law can protect them and their families and help achieve their long-term goals. She strives to provide excellent customer service and aims to be her client's attorney for life. With no further ado, welcome, Samara. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I've been dying to get somebody to, like yourself, to come in and talk to my viewers and everybody out there about estate planning. And you know, as a financial advisor, there's a lot of conversation that I have to have. And one of the hardest is always going to be estate planning. And it's because we really don't need estate planning, but we need estate planning. And by that, I mean, if you don't have documents or if you don't have your estate plan and something happens to you, well, your family's going to have to deal with it, not you. So I think it's an extremely important conversation, and we're going to break it down today. Thank you for joining us. Everyone has a story of why they do what they do. And I know you have some diverse background as being a New York City police officer, moving over to an estate planning attorney. I'm curious, is what inspired you to get into law and do what you do today?
Okay. That's a lot thrown at me at once, but let's see how I can. Long story short, a lot of people, when they hear that I'm former NYPD, they assume that I went to law school after NYPD, which is not the case. I actually was an attorney, as you mentioned, prior to NYPD. I started my career in litigation, of all things, which is totally different than what I do now, so it's kind of funny how that worked out. But when I became a police officer, and I think everyone can agree that's one of the most dangerous jobs in the world, I did not have any of my estate planning lined up. And me as an attorney who now practices that realizes what a terrible mistake that was. And the end of 2020, when I was a police officer at the time, I got into a really bad car accident on my way home from work, which changed everything in my life, literally. My career, my personal life, everything. I got extremely injured. I laugh about it now because I can joke about it now. Yeah. But I live in pain still to this day. I got hit by an ambulance, of all things, too, which is funny. You have to laugh about it.
Yeah.
But here I was, perfectly healthy and in great shape. I was working out all the time. And I was a police officer in New York City, not an easy job, not a safe job. And I had nothing lined up. And then here I am in 2021 going into the first of many of my surgeries. And I had nothing lined up.
Wow.
So the night before, I had a full shoulder repair to my shooting arm, of all things. I had to sit down with my mom and have the conversation that no parent ever wants to hear, right? Not a good time to do it. Right
before you go in for surgery, yeah.
But it's something that you have to think about, because what if, God forbid, something happens and I don't come out of it, or I don't come out of it, I'm incapacitated for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So it's really like something that hit home on a personal level, that I didn't have anything lined up. Mm-hmm. And a lot of my friends and, former colleagues, my own partner, still does not have it lined up. So it's really something I'm very passionate about, because it's a topic, like you said, nobody ever wants to talk about, but everybody needs.
Right. Let's get into some storytelling. So initially, when I'm working with clients, I often ask them, do you guys have a will? And oftentimes the answer is, oh, we've been meaning to get to that. And it's more common than, I'm sure you know, as an estate planning attorney. But one of the things that I can't do as a financial advisor that's licensed to give financial advice is I cannot give legal advice. And that legal advice has to be given by somebody like yourself, who's an attorney and able to give legal advice. So many people think estate planning is only for the wealthy. And I think I'd like to start off by asking you, can you explain why every single person should have some sort of an estate plan in effect.
So I think the biggest misconception, and I shouldn't say the biggest, but I should definitely say one of the biggest, is that you only need it if you have a huge net worth, you have a lot of assets, you have this, that, or the other. And everybody's so focused on, like you said, the will. And let me tell you, if I had $1 for every time somebody approached me and said, I've been meaning to do it, my financial planner would be very, very happy.
Yes.
But the thing is that everybody forgets that there's more aspects than just the will, right? And that's where a healthcare proxy comes into play. And that's where a power of attorney comes into play. They think, well, I don't own a home, or I don't really own a very expensive home, or I don't have this, I don't have children. There's so many, like, I don't have this, I don't have that. But the fact of the matter, anybody over the age of 18 needs to have some type of estate planning set up.
And so let's talk a little bit about those. You know, we mentioned the will. And for anybody who doesn't know what a will is,
it's essentially a document that's going to lay out where your assets are going, who they're being left to, things like that.
if, God forbid, something happens to you and you're no longer
Yes.
on this earth, right? So regardless of age, regardless of marital status, you obviously think that a will is important, so do I. So tell us a little bit about why wills do you think are so important, and maybe we can also touch base about going through probate, right?
Well, probate is completely different from a will,
Sure,
as you
yes,
know.
obviously.
A will is not gonna avoid probate. That's more into the trust aspect. But for a will, it's really gonna follow your wishes. That's the big thing. And I always advise everybody, regardless of whether or not you're gonna draft a will, whether or not you're gonna do any type of legal action, you need to make sure you're having an open conversation with your family, because you want all of your wishes to be followed through. And that's really why you're gonna draft up the will. So let's say you wanna leave your Aunt Mary your favorite china platter that she always oohs and ahs over at every family function, right? You can specifically leave that to Aunt Mary and she's going to get it. So that's really the number one thing, is you want to make sure that your wishes are followed. And that's why you're going to draft the will.
And can you just explain why a will does not avoid probate?
A will's not going to avoid probate. And you're going to have to, if you really want to avoid probate and anything like that, you're going to have to draft a trust, which I don't recommend for everybody.
Yes. Can we explain what probate is?
Probate is where you're going to have to go through the whole process with the court system and go through every single item, every asset, everything like that, and make sure everything's done properly and followed according to the court rules. That's, I guess, the best.
Yeah.
way
So
to
let's
explain.
put it in a concept of almost like a story. Aunt Mary passes away. She has a will. She has a car in her will. She's giving her little nephew the car. She maybe has some assets that are liquid assets in a brokerage account somewhere, we'll say. And she also has her artwork and maybe some jewelry. What can a will do, and how can that help Aunt Mary make sure that those people get what they want?
Yeah, so the family's going to take that to the court, and they're going to go through everything, and everything will be divvied up. And it also allows anyone who wants to appeal it or put in, and contest the will, then they have that opportunity, unfortunately. But it will, for the most part, go through with whatever Aunt Mary's wishes are.
I have had situations where everything was going great. Aunt Mary passed away. I'm getting a bunch of money. And then all of a sudden, Cousin Bob down in Florida says, no, Aunt Mary promised me I can have her car. And now all of a sudden he's contesting the will.
Yeah.
Years it could take to get through that process, right?
Correct. And it also depends the county. So every county has things differently a little bit, and every county has a time frame differently. Like I know Brooklyn is extremely, extremely, extremely backed up. I know that one of my colleagues actually has a case that's been going on in Brooklyn for 7 years now. And that's just wild. I mean, it's crazy and it's unfortunate, but it does happen. And I think a lot of people have a misconception that if I have a will, well, it's going to avoid all family drama and all family fights. And unfortunately, that's not the case. You can't do that.
Right.
You can try to avoid it by having your will and having the open conversations with everybody. When my grandmother passed away, which I did not want, obviously, but everything was laid out. We all knew there was no fighting. There was no nothing. She laid out the jewelry and everything. So there was absolutely no disputes. And it just worked out. But unfortunately, it's not always that way.
Okay. So let's flip the switch, I should say. Talk a little bit about healthcare proxies, durable power of attorneys. Most of the time, those are two documents that are more overlooked even than wills, right? So can we talk a little bit about what those are and why you might want to put those in place?
Yeah. I mean, I think healthcare proxy, obviously with my background and my history and my accident and all my surgeries, that's the number one thing that everybody should have over the age of 18. And the healthcare proxy is going to basically dictate who's going to make medical decisions for you if, God forbid, something happens and you're incapacitated and you can't speak on your own behalf.
Right.
And that's why, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record because I'm going to keep saying open communication, let people know exactly what you want and your future. I know that a lot of people feel very strongly they don't want to be hooked up to a machine. So that's something you need to let people know. If you don't want to be resuscitated, if God forbid, that goes down that route, that's something that your family needs to know because they need to know so that they're properly caring for you and following your wishes.
And it could also be like a leg amputation if you had a bad accident and you're out. And the doctors are saying, in order to save this person's life, we need to take off the bottom part of the leg or something. That's a healthcare proxy.
Absolutely.
Right.
Anything with regards to medical, life, emergency, anything like that. And you need to have somebody who really knows what you want. That's the biggest thing.
And so obviously you would recommend somebody who's near and dear to you and who knows what you want, and that's going to be a parent or somebody close to in your family.
And it also has to be somebody who you trust to make a decision, because it can't be somebody who's going to let the emotions come in. And obviously, I'm going to sound very cold-hearted saying it, but it has to be somebody that can put the emotions aside and make the decision.
Right.
Because some people can't. I had a client recently who told me, I know my sister wants to do it for me, but I can't trust her to because I know her emotions and I know she's never going to be able to make a decision.
Durable power of attorneys is something that I often have to ask for if somebody's leaving the country, if maybe somebody is afraid that their health is getting worse, right? It could be when my wife and I went out of the country, we had to make sure that we had a durable power of attorney set up in case that something happened to us and now my son is home by himself. We need to make sure that somebody's going to be able to obviously pay for things that he's going to need, right? So can you explain a little bit about durable power of attorney?
Yeah, we're going to have to discuss the fact that you left the country without your son, but I don't know how old he is, but you trusted him. So the power of attorney is obviously going to be definitely in your field spot on because it's more with regards to financial decisions, right? So recently I represented somebody who is unfortunately struggling with dementia. So she had a power of attorney for her nephew and we were handling the sale of her co-op. So things like that, like he was able to handle all of her finances because he had that power of attorney on her behalf and he's able to help her out, which is fantastic.
Right. So it comes to a legality of somebody's signature. If you're incapacitated due to dementia, they actually can't sign for themselves anymore. If a doctor diagnoses somebody with dementia, they're no longer able to make financial decisions on their behalf.
Correct.
And it's the same thing with anybody who lives like abroad in another country. If they want to call me and request a transaction, by law, I'm not allowed to accept that transaction because they are not domestically here sitting physically in the United States. So most people don't realize that. So that's why we have to have power of attorney set up.
I think a lot of people don't realize what they should do before they actually leave the country, which is very interesting that you said that, but it's spot on.
Yeah, that leads us to the next thing, which is guardianships. Right? So guardianships we run into when we're opening up like a uniform transfer to minor accounts. As everybody knows, you cannot be you can be an owner of an account, but you can't make actual legal requests or transaction requests unless you're age of majority, which is in New York State, I think it's 21, right?
Yeah, so I don't recommend any of my clients leaving anything to anybody under the age of 25.
25, okay.
Yes. They say that the brain doesn't fully develop until they're 25.
Oh, yeah.
So I always, and like you said, money changes everything. So if you're going to give a 21-year-old kid a couple $100,000, what are the chances that they're going to put that in the bank?
Yeah, well, or the chances they might go and get a car, right?
Correct. That's the number one thing that tends to happen.
Yeah. But maybe it's a younger couple and they have a couple of little kids. Why do they want guardianships?
So the big thing is you want to have a say in who's going to take care of the children, right? Mm-hmm. And you can put that in whatever document you want, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to happen, unfortunately, because it's really up to the judge. The judge is going to decide in the best interest of the child.
Right.
So again, broken record over here, but I'm going to say open communication with your family.
Sure.
You want to write it down, put it in whatever document you want. Maybe you want to write a separate letter and state, I do not want, let's say you have Aunt Mary is a closet alcoholic that nobody wants to talk about. And she's the one that's going to end up getting the kids because she's the one that lives local and she's the one that's in good health and she's the one that's financially in good financial health.
Sure.
but you know that she's a closet alcoholic and you don't want her to have your children. So that's where you have to put something in writing.
So, Samara, oftentimes I get questions from clients about whether they might need a trust or not and whether they want an irrevocable versus a revocable trust. So what do you often tell most people that come in to talk to you about setting up trusts?
Well, the first thing I always ask is, what's going on? What are your goals? Because a lot of people think that they need a trust and they really don't. So trusts are a more complex document. And I will preface this by saying it all depends, and I'm not giving legal advice, so call me, let's chat. The thing is with trust is it's more finite and it's more detail oriented, and that's the best way to say it. So with the trust, if it's irrevocable, that means once it's in there, it's not impossible to get out of the trust, but it's much harder to get out of the trust versus a revocable where you kind of have still more control over it.
Okay. And let's talk about ownership, right? So I know revocable trust is usually the grantor, whoever's setting it up, their social security number, right? So it's really not leaving their estate. It's still in their estate, but versus an irrevocable trust, which has its own tax ID number.
Correct.
So, and that's why it's irrevocable, because you're gifting it to a different entity. And once you gift it to somebody, a trust cannot gift it back to you.
Correct.
So that's why and that's how I always try to explain it. So, and I think that's really important for clients to understand is that you can open up an irrevocable trust and you could put your assets in there, but now you can't use it, right? Because you're protecting it for other reasons, and you can't get that money back because a trust can't give you the money back.
Well,
right?
You can and you can't use it. I just want to clarify that because a lot of people will put their homes into
Right, that's
trust.
true. Yes.
And you can still live in your house. They're not going to kick you out.
Right.
So it all depends on how you put things into the trust.
Okay. Right. So I think that's an important conversation to have with people, right? And so that being said, why would somebody want to have a revocable trust or even a living trust, as they call them, right?
Yeah. So if, God forbid, something happens and you need to seek long-term care, something like that, and you need to put in for a Medicaid application,
Okay.
They have a 5-year look back, and they're going to look at your assets. But you want to make sure that your home, if you have an asset, let's say we're in Westchester, houses here are not cheap.
Nope.
You don't want anybody touching that house. You want to live in that, and you want to leave it to your family. So if, God forbid, something happens, you need to seek care from Medicaid, and you want to put in an application, you don't want them to take your home. You want to leave your home to your family.
Let's talk about blended families, right? So blended families is something, and either that or second marriages, there's always unique situations, right? So if somebody is coming out of a divorce and has kids with an ex-spouse, and they get married and now they have children through a second marriage, why is it important to sit down with an estate planning attorney and help them make sure that everything is in line?
So again, it's all going to be dependent on what you have arranged with your ex-spouse and what the agreements is, but you want to make sure that your kids are covered. And if, God forbid, something happens to you, you want to make sure all of your children are covered, not
Right.
just your current marriage. Or I shouldn't say current marriage, right?
Yeah, well, that's the running joke these days. Yes, current marriage.
Your current spouse. But you want to make sure that everyone's covered. And if, God forbid, something happens, your family is covered, including everyone. But it is definitely a hot topic when you have blended families because
Right.
there's a lot of different aspects. And again, the legal term, it all depends. But
Well, what I would say is, too, is, I've had situations where, we're talking where somebody got remarried 40 years ago. So they have older children, maybe they're 50 years old children, they're in their 70s, but now they have a whole new family, right? Mm-hmm. And they want to make sure that the families of their first marriage get something, as well as making sure they leave something for their current family. And so I think oftentimes I refer, my clients to an estate planning attorney because complexity just breeds the need to have somebody as a professional help you out, right? And I think ultimately that's why it's really important to have an estate planning attorney like you who's going to come in and take a look at your situation and make sure that all those documents are set up. Yeah. So that being said, is there anything else that you think is really important to tell our listeners that you would want to make sure that they know about from this conversation?
Well, I just want to chime in really quick on what you just
go for
said.
it.
So I'm laughing in my head because one of our first days in the police academy, they sit us down and they give us the whole lecture about how you have to make sure that your beneficiaries are always updated.
Yep.
And then they tell you the horror story about the guy that had his ex-wife still listed. not the current wife.
Yep.
And then what happened? He was killed in the line of duty, and everything went to the ex-wife.
Yes. Well, that's so you're recommending obviously reviewing beneficiaries as well.
I mean, the big thing is, and I'm sure you advise your clients this as well,
Absolutely,
like
yeah.
you have to always constantly be reviewing and updating.
Yep.
Anytime there's any type of life change. So
Yep.
whether it be a divorce, a marriage, a child, whatever, you always want to make sure you're updating everything, reviewing everything. I mean, this is a totally different topic, but I just had a client recently who told me she hasn't updated her homeowner's policy since she bought the house 12 years ago. So 12 years ago, she bought the house for $550,000. It's now worth over $1 million.
Yep. Absolutely. That's why you got to review on a timely basis. This is what we do, right, as professionals. And I think ultimately the fact is that you want to have somebody, not a TikTok attorney. We love to talk about TikTok doctors. We love to talk about TikTok attorneys. But we also know they're probably not licensed, and they might just be listening to a chat GPT perhaps, and then giving people information that might be wrong. And I think everybody's situation is different, right? So like you had mentioned before, it's important that, what your brother and their family set up might not necessarily be what you set up. And so everybody has a different situation in life, and that's why it's important to do that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you get that all the time with your clients. Well, my friend Joe told me that he has this and I need to do this.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sitting here, I'm not married, I don't have children, so what I'm planning for my future is completely different than somebody who is married and has 3 kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
And as far as those life changes, you mentioned divorce, you mentioned remarrying, right? What other, I guess, events in your life will require you to go update your documents?
It's so many. There's so many. I mean, I told you earlier, like, I'm obsessed with my niece. My niece is the greatest thing in the world. She's my favorite person. And so obviously when she came in, everything has to be updated because forget about my brother. Forget about it.
Right.
So, but, so any type of change in your life, whatever it may be, whether it be, and also pets have to be included too. Don't forget our beloved pets.
Yeah,
so let's
absolutely.
say now you have a dog that you love and adore, and you want to make sure that they're cared for.
Yeah.
So that might be another update that you have to do.
Right, absolutely. The other thing I always think about is, when you lose a loved one, your partner from life, right? And now all of a sudden, that person's primary durable power of attorney was the spouse that's no longer here.
Yeah.
You got to go and you get those updated, right? And then of course you can always add a contingent, right, to most of those documents in case that happens. Anything else that you'd like to share? Do you think is important to know?
I think the biggest thing and the most important thing, and I've said it a million times, I'll say it again, communication. Just have that open dialogue. So nobody is surprised when, God forbid, your day comes and everybody knows everybody's on the same page, and then there's no questions. I mean, there might still be fights. We've all have those horror stories that we've heard about, but if you have open conversations, and you can avoid a lot of issues.
Right, absolutely.
That's the biggest thing. And again, broken record, it all depends. Everybody's situation's different.
Yeah. And so if you don't have estate planning documents, it's going to be up to the courts to determine what happens. So I would say to most people, I'm like, well, there is a plan. And if you don't have a plan, there's a plan. And that's why I was saying before, it's going to be up to some stranger, some judge who's going to determine what happens. So if you want to make sure that somebody's being taken care of after you're no longer part of this world, you want to put it in writing, right?
No, you said it perfectly. Yeah. If you don't have a plan, there's a plan for you.
Oftentimes, Samara, clients might say, well, I don't really need an estate planning attorney. I'm going to just go online and use one of those online tools. And obviously, when I hear that, I cringe. So can you kind of give a comparison of somebody using an online tool versus what they would get going to see an estate planning attorney?
So there's always going to be obviously a difference between talking to a computer and talking to a human. Yeah. I don't care what ChatGPT says. I think that there's always a difference between talking to a human and talking to a computer.
Sure.
I think the biggest thing is there's a lot of different loopholes and little things that they might not get online that you get from talking to an attorney. And which reminds me, I forgot to mention earlier, one of the biggest life changes, let's say you have a falling out with a family member. Right. It's your brother. And you're no longer speaking, you're no longer on terms, you want him getting nothing. you have to specify that in the will because he's your brother. And if the will says it gets left to all brothers and you have 3 brothers, but you don't speak to one, guess what?
Yeah.
So that's a big thing. There's things that a computer might not pick up that a human, a lawyer, will pick up.
As professionals, we're really good listeners. And because we might not write it down that, oh, he's not getting along with one of his brothers, but that's certainly going to be something that you're going to bring back up later saying, yeah, I know you said before we're not getting along with your brother. Is that something you want to adjust? And that online thing is not going to be able to ask you that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the same thing, I mean, I had a client a few weeks ago who wanted to have her brother as the main and then her alternate, because I always recommend having an alternate,
Yep.
being her nephew. And I said, okay, how old's your nephew?
Yeah.
15.
Yep.
We're not listing him, obviously.
Yes.
But is the computer going to ask that follow-up question?
Yeah. No, and those are great points. So, and again, that's why humans are better than computers, right?
Agreed.
Because we encompass everything. So for any of our listeners who are listening, who are hearing this, and their anxiety levels are raised because they're dealing with something, can you tell somebody what the first steps to do for starting this whole process?
Okay, so first and foremost, I should say I'm only licensed in New York.
Yeah. Okay.
I do have friends in other states, but if you are in New York, please feel free to give me a call. I'm happy to have a conversation. That's really the best place to start.
Right.
Do not Google it. It's just like Googling WebMD, with your symptoms. It's the same thing if you Google it. Please don't do DIYs. Just give me a call. Let's have a conversation. And if I can't help you, I'm sure I know somebody who can.
This has been great. This is educational. How can listeners, if they're dealing or they have something that they want to talk about, how can they contact you? How can they get in touch with you?
So you can reach out to me at any point in time at my office. The number is 914-810-3122.
Great.
And that's the best way. And I do free consultations. I'm always happy to have a conversation.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
And for anybody who has any questions about this, please, if you need to reach Samara, you can reach her at the number she gave you, or you can always email us at hello@EnRich Life Podcast, and we'll make sure that you get in touch with Samara as well. This has been a great series on elder care. And we look forward to publishing and sharing all this great information with you. And we're also looking for a lot of different other topics. So if you have a topic that you're interested in, please feel free to reach out and let us know what that financial topic is, and we'd love to talk about it. Thanks so much. Looking forward to speaking to you soon. Have a great day.